Thank you very much for the introduction, Janet. And especially thank you also to the organizers of this Europortfolio webinar, in particular Igor and Rob. And I'm very happy that I can present to you tonight, or rather in Europe, then of course in the morning. And I hope we'll have a good time today. Please feel free to use the chat to post your questions or comments, and I'll see that I can answer them as best as possible already during the presentation. And if I miss anybody's question, please feel free to put them back in during Q&A time. I'm kind of planning to talk only about for half an hour so that we have plenty of time to for questions and comments and also your own insight, because I see that a number of Mahara users are already in the chat, and then the majority of you are probably already very familiar with e-portfolios, even if you use other softwares, and therefore I'm very much looking forward to the discussion. So before getting started, I just want to pop in between a few prepared pieces of text so that you already have some links available that you can follow. And the first links here actually go to the presentation, so that, because that's often the first question, can we have access to that? So they are already available, and they'll also be available on SlideShare for downloading later on. But if you do want to have view the presentation in a bigger format, please follow that first link that has the live at the end, because that allows me to control the slides from my end, and you'll see them changing and don't just have to watch the small window there. Okay, so who am I actually? Well, I'm actually wearing many different hats and on a very daily basis. So I work for Catalyst IT, which is the main development company for Mahara, and we are based in New Zealand. And in Catalyst, I have project manager responsibilities, and also support users, support organizations using Mahara, and sometimes I still give a little bit of Moodle support or hold workshops. But then on the other hand, I also have responsibilities within the Mahara community, which is the open source community around the software. And there I am the Mahara project lead, so somebody who kind of looks also after the direction of Mahara alongside our lead developer. And I'm also the community facilitator. That's why you see me quite frequently posting about Mahara and various media, also answering questions on the forums. Besides that, I'm also mainly responsible for the Mahara user manual, including all the spelling mistakes that you might see in there. And also sometimes am able to contribute to the code side itself by fixing language strings. And so on a daily basis, things change quite quickly in my work day, and depending on what needs to be done. But I'm very fortunate to be working as part of the Mahara core development team and looking after the software that we make available to everyone around the world. And I actually started out using Mahara in Luxembourg at the University of Luxembourg, because back in 2007, we were looking for a new e-portfolio platform, which did not only allow the upload of files, but also more interaction and better display of artifacts. And that's when we came across Mahara. And we started using it with students in a bachelor program in 2008. And then in 2009, I decided not to continue my university career and moved to New Zealand in 2010, namely to the birthplace of Mahara, working with Catalyst, who has been the main development company for Mahara since its inception in 2006. And so Mahara just still has headquarters in Wellington, New Zealand, where I'm located, which is pretty much about 18,000 kilometers away from Europe and really halfway around the world. But nevertheless, we don't just have the software in use in New Zealand, but really around the world, on pretty much every continent. The only continent that I'm not aware of that has a Mahara instance or Mahara users as such is Antarctica. But other than that, Mahara can be found in schools, universities, and other organizations around the world on every continent, in every nook and cranny. And so already the number of participants and also the variety where you all come from means that it is widely dispersed across the world and used in many different contexts. So what I want to talk briefly about is just before we go into today's topic of how features get into Mahara and also what's on the roadmap of Mahara, I just, for those of you who might still be rather new to Mahara, just give a very brief introduction to it so that you have an overview of it. So Mahara means to think or thinking in Te Reo Māori, which is the language of the Māori here in New Zealand. And I find it always aptly named because when you create a portfolio, you do need to think. You need to think about what you want to put into it. You need to reflect on it and really kind of work with it and not just have all your learning evidence dumped into it. So, but you don't just think when you create your portfolio, but you also do a lot of other activities. And one of them is to create, because on Mahara you can create content directly on the platform in the form of journal entries or blog entries, in the form of a resume, or you can simply type text into a text area and have that displayed on your page. But of course, often we don't want to create content on the fly or directly in a platform, but have that already available on our computer. And that's when you collect that content just into Mahara by uploading files, so images, text documents, PDFs, videos, audio files, and can upload them then to your Mahara instance in order to use it in your portfolios. And nowadays we also work quite a bit with social media and online authoring tools so that it is imperative that we can also aggregate content, namely in the form of using RSS feeds from external blogs or our own blogs or other news sites or websites that we want to subscribe to and just put content into our portfolio, but also use embed code, like iframe embed code, in order to make videos or animations directly available in the portfolio so that you don't need to send your viewers just a link and they then go off and view the content on another site, but you keep them within your portfolio. And once you have created, collected, and aggregated your content, or even already in between, you can reflect on it. Because a portfolio, in my mind, is always very much tied to reflection, so that you look at your learning evidence and don't just have it there, but also think back onto it, review it, think what you did, what went well, what didn't go so well, and learn from all those reflections. And a portfolio is a very good example of making those reflections explicit instead of just collecting them in our head. So once you have all your content sorted, you can go on to organizing that in your portfolio. And so in Mahara, we have a content side and then the organization side. So that's where you really get ready for putting your learning evidence and your artifacts into your portfolio so that you can then, in the end, present that. And presenting here does not mean simply a showcase portfolio, but that just means presenting your learning evidence, your reflections in a portfolio. And on Mahara, you can have multiple portfolios. You can have as many portfolios as you want. They can be small, just be consisting of one page, or they can be an entire collection of pages so that you can really flesh out your reflections and showcase your learning or show the process that you have gone through and the development that you have made. over time. So essentially what you're doing is you're creating small websites of curated content from your learning. And once you have that done, you can share it with others. Because in contrast to a lot of other websites that are available to you where you can just post your content like on blogs or also on other sites where you can make some small websites as well, Mahara has a highly granular permissions framework because we believe that it is important for the learner always to be in the center and to decide who shall have access to what. So in Mahara, when you use it in a school or university setting, the teacher does not always immediately have access to your work, but you decide who shall be able to view it. And therefore you can share it just with one person, or you can share it with one group of people, or you can share it with the entire world, or you can share it with just a few people for one day, a week, or a year. And so you can really decide on your own with whom you want to share your portfolio. And again, it is always limited to just one portfolio. So you can create one portfolio for a class and then another one for applying to a job. And the sharing permissions can be very, very different. So up to now, we've kind of looked at just on the creation side of an individual portfolio, how you work with your portfolio. However, there's more to it because the project team already realized very early on that it is important to also pull other people in, to have other people working with you on the portfolio, because through interactions with others, do we learn, do we reflect more, do we gain new insight? So collaborating in Mahara is very important. So you can, if the portfolio author allowed it, you can give feedback directly on a portfolio or even on individual learning evidence, or you can work together on a portfolio and create that in a group. And beyond that, you can also network. So you can really set up small communities of practice or even bigger communities of practice and use the discussion forums to talk about your ideas, your practices, and then work together in order to continue on a project, to flesh things out, and also to learn from each other. So that was a very brief introduction, kind of, and some of the concepts of Mahara. Now I'd like to continue to how features actually get into Mahara so that we know how all this that I've just been talking about is actually made possible. So every 6 months, we have a gift to you, the Mahara user community. It's a gift from the Mahara team, which is not just in New Zealand, but around the world, to everybody who is using Mahara or who is interested in using Mahara. And the gift to you is a new version of Mahara. So let's take a look at what that actually means in terms of a calendar. So here's our yearly planner from January all the way to December. And Mahara is being released twice a year, once in April and once in October. And our April releases are from this year on always named 04, and the October ones 10 for the month in which they have been, in which they are going to be released. So the latest, very latest version of Mahara was released in April this year, and so it is version 15.04 or 15.04, and the October version will be 15.10. And we believe that using a date-based versioning system makes it easier for our user community to know when the version that they are using has been released, and then also implicitly, of course, know for how long it is being supported. Because generally we have 18 months of support for one version of Mahara for security fixes. Let me just briefly take a look at the chat. Igor said, would very much like to know if Mahara plans feature for adding other digital identities such as Facebook and LinkedIn. We don't have any plans, Igor, for making direct or putting something into core for that at the moment, but there is already the Jan Rain plugin available on our plugins page. let me just get that into the chat, which already allows for authentication to commonly used protocols that are being used, for example, by Twitter or Facebook or Google. And therefore, if you have a Mahara site that should be open to the entire world, then you can already take a look at that plugin. But now back to our release schedule. Sorry. That doesn't work. Okay, sorry for the redirect not working. I'll get the link in a second. Okay, so it's this one. Okay, so that second link should work then. Sorry for the redirect not working properly at the moment. So in order to bring a Mahara release out in April and October, we do need to work quite a long time on those, generally for about 6 months. And in order to get everything out by the approximate time frame that we have set ourselves, we need to have all new features in place well in advance. And that's where the other 2 highlighted months come in, namely February and August, because those are our month in which the feature freeze takes place, usually at the very beginning of the month, so that we still have 2 months to look at those new features and see that we can get as many as possible ready for the release of Mahara of the next version. Since we are on a date-based, time-based release cycle, we look into how much we can get done for one release, and if something does not get done by the time, we postpone it until the next release or a future release if there are still major things that need to be figured out. So instead of waiting until we have all the features accumulated that we do want to put into a release, at some point we say, okay, now we stop looking at new features and we get the release ready. And that allows us to have 2 releases per year. And so the April release usually is best for the Northern Hemisphere for academic organizations, because then they can update over June or July, so their summer holidays. And then the October release is predominantly for us in the Southern Hemisphere, so that we can update over our summer, which is December and January. And so much for the release cycle. And now, who can actually contribute to features? And that is all of you. Everyone around the world can contribute. And contributing to the software does not mean simply programming. There are a lot of other tasks involved in which you can get started in. And some of you, especially those that are active in the Mahara community, have already gone through a number of those processes and participate in discussions and the like. So what I'd like to do now in the next few minutes is to briefly outline how you can contribute to putting features into Mahara, and therefore show you how a feature gets into Mahara itself. So first you'll have an idea that you want to have accomplished in Mahara that you want to put in. Once you have your idea, of course, to see if other people are interested as well, you discuss it in our discussion forums and also in the bug tracker. And that is a very good way of just validating whether other people are also interested in your ideas, and for us as the project team to know whether we should be implementing that feature. Once you've discussed it and once you're happy with what it's going to look like, you can start implementing it. So that's the actual programming bit of it. And once it's programmed, it goes, you can submit it to the Mahara project. And that is done through our code review system, which sits in Garrett at reviews.mahara.org, so that we can actually then test your feature or your bug fix. And that is really important because we do want to try to put as few bugs into Mahara as possible, and also want to ensure that the features that we put in work within Mahara so that they gel with the rest of the features and don't just sit there on their own and don't really interact with the rest of the software. So it is important that we perform a code review and also a front-end review. So a manual testing happens as well so that we know that everything looks all right there. And if you want to get started, you are very welcome to help us test things. So you don't need to be a developer for that, but you can simply set up a Mahara instance as described in the link that I just posted, or slightly easier way by using a pre-made virtual machine. I will need to update that a bit because that was made for Mahara Hui, which was just in April. But we do want to make some more generic virtual machines available. But for the time being, if you just want to give it a try, or if you don't have a testing environment available at your organizations to use, then you could try to install one of those virtual machines. Once the testing has been done, we then merge it into Mahara. And new features always go into the upcoming release. So we are never putting new features back into something that we've already released. And only high importance bug fixes also make it back to old version. Otherwise, everything goes into the upcoming version. And that ensures that when we bring out security releases or minor version updates, they are not so invasive and they are usually easily applied and can be done very quickly. Hi Dajan, nice to see you here. So just one more thing that I needed to post is, yes, those videos that you, the virtual machine that I created was for a workshop for Roger Emery from Southampton Solent University at Mahara Hui in New Zealand, but you're very welcome to use them for the time being. Okay, so now to the second important part. What's actually on our Mahara roadmap? Because we don't really publish that since the project team is still fairly small. It is a team here in New Zealand of dedicated Mahara developers, and then developers around the world like Gregor in Slovenia, Tobias Teusch in Germany, Mike Kelly in the United Kingdom, and now we've had two new contributors from Canada, another contributor from Germany. We have a Japanese contributor and some other European contributors and contributors in other countries as well, so that it is very distributed. And because the Catalyst project team cannot implement all new features by ourselves, that's where we really rely also on the community to either contribute features or to fund the development of Mahara Org so that we can put new features into the software. But I would like to highlight 4 directions that are very important for us in the project, and a lot of smaller features or also bigger features fall into those. So the first really important thing is that we do know that Mahara is not always the super easiest software to use, and that there can be a learning curve, and for some users also a steep learning curve. And that is something, of course, that we do want to improve so that we have more happy users. And that means every version that we release, we make usability changes and usability improvements, making it easier for users to find their way around Mahara, and also try to reducing clicks to the bare minimum. What we are doing for Mahara 1510 at the moment is that we work heavily on the front end. So Mahara 1510 will have a new set of themes, entirely updated, refreshed, modernized, because our current themes have been with us for quite some time. And we achieve that not just by changing the themes, but really also by stripping out the entire CSS and putting Bootstrap in. And that is something that our user community has wanted for quite some time, because a lot of people know Bootstrap from other applications that they use, and so already feel more comfortable theming with that, making changes. And Bootstrap also helps us make Mahara more responsive more easily, and also gives it a newer look and feel that we do want to achieve, because by now Mahara is already 9 years old. Another area that we do have on our radar quite heavily is mobile, and that means, again, going back to Bootstrap, is that it will be easier to use it on mobile devices. Already in Mahara 15.04 we implemented multi-touch, so that when you're on a tablet or smartphone you can use drag and drop now. So you don't have to worry about the clicking radio buttons and then putting the blocks there manually, but you can just use your regular drag and drop. And we also have 2 applications, one for Android and another one for iOS available, that we are looking into updating. The iOS one, Portfolio app, will be updated to Experience app by Bright Cookie. And a student here at in Wellington is looking at updating Mahara Droid and also giving it a number of new features. So he is actually in contact with some users to give him feedback on what they like at the moment, what they don't like, so that he also has good feedback in terms of usability input in order to make necessary changes. Another area that we are looking into is assessment. And assessment has been becoming more important and more spoken about also in Mahara, even though we started out as personal learning environment, because a lot of universities find that if there's an assessment component, students are oftentimes more willing to create a portfolio. And assessment does not necessarily mean just your typical grading of a work, but it can mean alternative ways of assessment, and really ways of assessing a portfolio that work with the portfolio. And one way of how we want to achieve that is by implementing evidence maps into Mahara. And that is a project started by the University of Canberra and called Smart Evidence. So here you see just a mock-up of what the end result should look like, namely that you can set up a competency framework in Mahara with standards and substandards, and then link your portfolio to those standards. And then you can say which substandards a particular portfolio page belongs to, and there you have a very quick overview of where you are at in your portfolio, if you've already achieved something in it, if you're still waiting for feedback, or if you need to review something. And the idea is also that you can use that for assessment, so by somebody else, but also for self-assessment. And it's not supposed to be just a tick box checklist where you tick off all the things that you've already done, and if you have the bare minimum, you're just good to go, but that you really work with it and use it as visual aid. If you want to know more about that, I invite you to watch the recording of a session that Shane and I facilitated in April at the Moodle Mahara meetup in Adelaide, where we talk about smart evidence, and there you can find some more background information. And since it's quite a big project, if you are interested in it, please let me know, because funding, especially in this case, is very important. And last but not least, we also look at integration. So integration in particular accomplished by web services, meaning that since Mahara is a very specialized software for portfolio creation, community work and the like, we don't have all other functionality available that you might want to use. So we don't have an authoring tool for multimedia content. We don't have a media server where you can immediately edit your videos or your presentations. We don't have a wiki and the like. But instead of building all that functionality and replicating it and reinventing the wheel, we rather look at how we can integrate other systems with Mahara so that they can work together. And so that you can use your regular tools that you are already used to, but can either move content into Mahara, make content directly visible in Mahara, and the like. And that is done through web services and integration. And that is basically our large roadmap for Mahara. And if you are interested in contributing to that and learning more about it, you're very welcome to become active in the community. And not just either stay a student or a teacher, because we have a lot of those in the community already, and they are extremely important. They are important because they are our users. They give feedback to their support staff, and the support staff then is oftentimes contributing to Mahara with accumulated feedback or also with other ideas or bug fixes. Users are important for software because without users we wouldn't really need to develop something. So that is already the first step into becoming an active Mahara contributor. So once you're over that hurdle, you can also be an organizer. And we have Dajan in here, who is the organizer, amongst others, of the Mahara Hui France later in the month. And we also have organizers around the world who organize user group meetings. And they are really important because they are the connectors, they are the networkers and bring people together so that they have a place where they can talk about Mahara. And we also have Maxi, which is the Mahara user group Southern England. And I think Teresa already mentioned that earlier on. And we also have organizers of Facebook groups and LinkedIn group who do post things about Mahara and therefore keep all their individual user communities up to date. If you want to get started more and become more active in the wider Mahara community, you are very welcome to become a Mahara Ninja, which is our contributor. And that starts really easy by simply reporting a bug or asking for a feature or putting out a wish list item and just letting people know what you think and how maybe some things could also be fixed. We then also have a security guard who makes sure that we don't have any security holes, and that's why we have security releases, because people around the world, kind of oftentimes the more techie ones, they report us bugs that could be exploited, and so we fix those. And of course, we also can't do without our core developers who actually do the entire programming. And even if you just contribute one patch to Mahara, you have something in core Mahara and then therefore could consider you a core developer. We do have some who have more rights in the community in terms of the code maintenance, and that is to ensure that the code quality is there, that things are done in a cohesive way and also in a maintainable way, so that if a new developer comes along, they can find themselves amongst the code and can work with it more easily. Of course, programmers don't always make everything correct and sometimes contribute code that is a bit, that needs a little bit more refining. And that's what we have the code reviewers for, and also the testers, who ensure that as few bugs as possible are put into Mahara itself before we release it. We also have documentation writers who contribute to the documentation, to help files, make videos, make instruction leaflets and so on for the community to use, or even just for their own organizations. And everybody wants, of course, a pretty design, and that's why we have talented designers in the community who make things pretty so that everybody has an environment that they'd like to look at. So you can brand your Mahara according to what your organization's brand is. You don't need to use the Mahara that is white and green and has the Mahara logo. You can pop in your own university, organization, school logo and really make it your own. And we wouldn't be Mahara without our translators. They perform a really important role. They don't just translate the software, which is already a big feat, but they also now started translating the user manual. And especially Dajan, our French translator, is very active in that and makes sure that everything is always translated entirely so that the French community can also use Mahara in their own language. And last but not least, we have 2 automated processes, which are kind of also members of the community. We kind of personify them as well, because they are really important and make our life easier, especially on the infrastructure. And that is the Mahara community. And everybody, as you can see, as part of the community, be it that you're a user starting out using it as a student or as an instructor, and then gradually you might get interested in contributing more to Mahara and making your voice heard. So if you are interested in joining and haven't done so yet, you are very welcome to become an active member of the Mahara community, and we have our discussions on mahara.org. If you want to keep your portfolio, that is usually done on your own instance, or for example here on the Europortfolio instance or other Mahara instances, which have the entire feature set available. Mahara.org is primarily used for discussions around Mahara, so that we can stay in touch with everyone who wants to participate in those. Now, just very briefly, because time is running away, just some upcoming events where you can meet a number of those contributors and learn more about Mahara, look at examples and what people have done in the software, how they're using that in their organizations. So the next upcoming events until the end of the year that I'm aware of at the moment, there are a number of other smaller ones sure also going on, are Mahara Org France, just in a few days in Toulouse. That is organized by Dajan. So if you have any questions for him, please check back. Then there's going to be a Swiss EduHub webinar on the 18th of June that I'm going to facilitate. More details will be posted on the website. We also have the Europortfolio Germany chapter meeting again on the 9th of July. They meet every other month. We have a Mahara user group meeting in New York on the 24th of July. The Mahara Open Forum in Japan will take place from the 10th to 11th of October in Chiba. Mahara Org UK has a new date this year. So instead of having it in July, it is going to be held at the beginning of November on the 9th and the 10th. And in the same month, we are going to have Mahara DE, which is the Mahara Bar Camp, an unconference in Kassel from the 27th to the 28th of November. And if you don't want to remember all those dates, you're welcome to go to our events page, where you can also find our events calendar that you can subscribe to. It's just a regular Google Calendar, so that you're not missing out on any of those dates. And thanks for popping in the URL, Dajan. And so that leaves me to go into the question and answer session. And if you want to contact me directly, please feel free to drop me a line at kristina@catalyst.net.nz, or send me a message on Twitter, or send me a message on mahara.org, or post in the forums, and I'm sure I will see it.